Podcasting, the final frontier. This is the Hammer Podcast. Its 30-minute mission: to rehash geeky topics, to seek out new bastions of nerdiness, to timidly go where the more talented have gone before. Greetings, and welcome to the Hammer Podcast, the official podcast of the HammerStrikes.com. I'm your host, Gene Hendricks, and I'm pretty sure that, like me, you didn't think you'd be hearing that anytime soon. And that is because life. Real life does tend to get in the way of this hobby. Now, I believe I explained it somewhere else, but I will reiterate it here, being that this is the 25th episode of the Hammer Podcast. This episode was supposed to come out in fall of 2016. And I'm recording this in February of 2018. So you can tell that things got a little hectic. And that is because my wife, Michelle, got a job. And this is after a long drought of not working. She got a job at Amazon, which happens to have a fulfillment center in our town, which makes commuting really nice for her. But she's working nights. She's working Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday nights, 10 hours each. So that basically leaves me home to watch Kira, and she is 9 years old now, but she's not. Neither Kira nor I think she's doing well enough to just be on her own. So I'm spending time with her those 4 nights. And that means that Wednesday night is the only weeknight where we're home together as a family, so I don't do podcasting then, unless I have to be a guest on another show. So I'm kind of limited, and, on the weekends, I like spending time with the family. I don't want to say, hey, we're all here together, so I'm going to go off in this room and shut myself away. So, this is definitely taking a back seat to all of that. So I am not going to promise that I'm back. I'm going to promise to try and get stuff out this year. This being the first, hopefully, episode, and not the only episode, but we will see how this goes. It all really depends on how life is, and I'm sure you all agree that family comes before podcast. So I will continue to guest star on as many shows as I can. I will try and work this in more often. I'll see if I can wrangle Kira and Michelle into doing an episode or 2 with me and see how that goes. I know Kira and I have been watching a lot of anime together, which is very interesting because I have to explain certain things to her as far as tropes and things like that. But she's really enjoying it, and she enjoys some of, I wouldn't say adult anime, but definitely in the TV-14 range. Now, before anyone gets upset at me, you're letting a 9-year-old watch a TV-14 show. Yeah, well, she was about 3 when I showed her Batman the Animated Series, and that was TVY7, so she's always been a little bit above, but I am previewing most of the stuff, and if I know it's beyond where she is right now, I don't let her watch it. So it should be interesting, family life, and maybe bleeding into podcasts, but we shall see. In any case, I'm sorry, I will not be doing listener feedback this time, just because I really am squeezing this recording in between Michelle and Kira going to bed and me going on to another podcast, so I don't have a huge amount of time. So let me just set up that this, like I said, was recorded about a year and a half ago, and it's, I think, worth the wait. You'll hear the producer, Paul Spataro, and I talking about one of the more underrated sequels, I would say. I enjoy this movie. Paul gets some enjoyment out of it, and I'll just leave the rest for the discussion. So hopefully you'll be hearing my voice on this feed in the near future, but again, I'm not going to promise anything. Alright, on with the show.
I'm Captain Benjamin Sisko. Welcome to Deep Space Nine.
Red alert! All crew members report to battle stations.
Red alert. Shields up.
What shields?
You're Starfleet officers! Now start acting like it!
Oh, it's just Garrick. Plain, simple Garrick.
Dax, we might have just discovered the first stable wormhole known to exist.
The wormhole does bring them our way, doesn't it?
Everyone wants a piece of the new frontier.
It's sort of become a leading center of commerce and of scientific exploration. Starfleet, one of our most important posts.
Quite a motley crew you've assembled here, Benji.
Listen to The Prophets, a Deep Space Nine podcast. And here are your hosts, Andrew Leyland and Paul Spataro.
Bloody hell. Oh, I love a woman in uniform.
Only on TrueTrueFreaks.com.
Welcome back. And yet again, I have a returning guest this month. And it seems to be the year for returning guests, which is great. But this guy, the last time he was on, not only was it a Legends of Superheroes episode, but it was also a duo. But this time we have gotten rid of Dr. Bill, but we have with us the producer, the host of the brand new, wonderful Is It Jaws podcast, Mr. Paul Spataro. How are you, sir?
Good, Gene. Thanks for having me back again. That was the first time you and I ever spoke that last time.
Yes.
That's how long ago that was.
And since then, we have spoken numerous times, just not on this show.
Exactly. You've been on Back to the Bins numerous times. We even did Comics Monthly Monday together.
Yes, that was fun. With
and we met face to face, so we've done a lot since then.
Yeah, and it hasn't been that long, really. It's only, like a year and a half or something since that episode? Shows you how much research I do ahead of time.
I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. But I know the face-to-face was over a year ago, and by then I already felt like I knew you pretty well, so...
That's from all the emails I send in to listen to the Prophets.
That's it. Well, we got to get them from somewhere.
Well, you didn't get one this week because I was on. And I'm not going to be that meta about it. But anyway...
Well, that's what I do with when certain people are on. I just have them read their own emails. Did we do that to you?
Yes, that wasn't the episode that was this week. That'll be in 2 weeks.
Okay, because I think that's kind of meta.
Yeah, which was funny because I cracked Andy up just on the title of the one email. I think I'm a clone now.
Oh yeah, that's a great line.
Well, I have to thank Weird Al for that one.
But we're so far ahead on the recording that by the time they get posted, I don't remember what's on them anymore.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, on that particular show, I listen anyway just to see what got cut and what's in, because the conversations range all over the place. I'm always interested to hear where you decided the episode starts and ends and what goes on afterwards.
Yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of the editing with that show, is how much of the preamble conversation do I actually either cut out or cut off of the beginning and throw it at the end. But most of like once we start recording, most of what you hear is pretty much uncut.
Yeah, because it seems like there's a nice flow to it. You guys you're in season 3 now, so you've had plenty of time to get all the kinks worked out. So once the show's on, it's on.
Yeah, that's pretty much the reality of it. And I tell you, I have a ball doing that. I have a ball doing all these shows.
Well,
I love doing the shows I'm on, and I love coming on and guesting on other people's shows.
Well, if you didn't like it, why would you do it? It's not like you're making money on this thing.
I'm not.
Well,
all this time I thought this was my retirement fund.
Maybe you are. I mean, you have the seniority in Demonzacor over me, so you might have gotten to actual pay scale. I'm still getting these company vouchers.
I'm just happy that I don't have to pay to be on.
Oh, there is that. Yes. Yeah. Well, anyway, we're not talking about DS9 or anything like that on this episode. We're actually talking about Jaws 2. Don't ask me how we got there from where we just were, but that's how it works. And we're continuing my look this year at generational stories. And most people are familiar with Jaws. Not as many are as familiar with Jaws 2. Now, in Jaws 2, you have Brody's kids. Michael is now 17, and Sean is, they don't actually mention his age, but I would say he's about 10. Would you agree with that, Paul?
I'd say it's probably about right. 10, 11, somewhere in that range.
Something there. And Michael has his friends who all have their own sailboats, and they go out together. You know, it's a lot better than being a biker gang. You know, they're in a sailboat club, essentially. So, part of the story of this is Chief Brody wants Michael to get a job. Michael, being a teenager, doesn't want to get a job, and ends up having to sneak out to be with his friends, and, more importantly, the cute girl who turns into a basket case by the end of the movie. So, I am a child of the 80s. I mean, I was born in 75, but I was a kid in the 80s, and I was a teenager late 80s, early 90s. So, I have a different life experience from this, because this movie came out in 1978. And, quick aside, I find it very amusing that Jaws came out the year I was born, and Jaws 2 came out the year my sister was born.
You think there was something going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would rate me as a Jaws and her as a Jaws 3.
There you go. I'm not so sure she would concur.
I'm safe. She doesn't listen to this show.
Probably a good thing.
Yes. But, now, Paul, when this movie came out, you were what, like 14? Somewhere around?
You said 78?
78.
So I would have been 15.
15. So you had a lot more in common with Michael at this point, when this movie came out. Now, let me preface this by saying I know I'm not a normal person, and I was not a normal teenager. I hardly ever got grounded. I always let my parents know where I was, even when I was over a friend's house. Like, if I'm 16... 17, I'm over a friend's house, we're going to go know the friends. I call my parents first. Hey, you know, we're at Andy's house, we're going to go over to Frank's house. You know, and I was always home by curfew, which tended to be like midnight, so it wasn't really that big of a problem. Were you more like me or more like Mike in this?
I was closer to you. I wouldn't necessarily, if my curfew was midnight, my trick... You see, I have 2 older brothers and an older sister. I'm the youngest of 4.
Aha!
And my 2 older brothers would routinely, if their curfew was midnight, they'd come strolling in the house at 1:30, 2 o'clock, and the shit would hit the fan. just pretty much, it was routine. Then I got to be the same age, and I would go out, and my curfew would be midnight, and I realized, boy, if I call up the house at 11:59, and I'm half an hour away, and there's not a chance in heck I could get home by midnight, but I say to them, oh, I'm at so-and-so's house, is it okay if I stay out longer? There was no doubt they always said yes. Mm-hmm. And they were always very happy that I called and didn't leave them there worrying. And to me, it always perplexed me that they would just always push the envelope and then get in trouble for it, whereas I was able to do the same things they were doing without getting into any trouble just on the basis of making a phone call.
Right. Yeah.
So I wasn't quite you, because I wasn't home at midnight like I was supposed to be. But I also wasn't necessarily breaking the rules either.
Right. You never... I never snuck out.
No, me neither.
You know, whereas Mike in this... But then again, I never had the opportunity to take a cute girl that didn't go to school with me out on a boat, all on my own.
Well, I also never had the opportunity to take a cute girl who did go to school with me out on a boat either.
Well, yeah...
In fact, I very rarely had the opportunity to take cute girls out anywhere, on anything, at any time.
I'm right there with you.
It's kind of depressing.
But we both ended up becoming parents, so it actually worked out all in the end.
Yes, somewhere along the line we found our sea legs, so to speak. But I can't say I was much of a ladies' man as a teenager.
No, I definitely was not. Not that I didn't try sometimes, but never actually worked out. But then again, I didn't look like Mike in this movie either.
Nor did I.
So that may have something to do with it. So, watching this, I see somebody doing something that when I was a kid, when I used to watch this when I was younger, I wouldn't say when I was a kid, because when I watched it as a kid, I identified more with Sean than with Michael. But watching it when I was a teenager, because this is one of those movies that if it was on, I would stop and watch it. So it's not one that I would throw throw in the VCR that often. I don't even remember if we had it on VHS. I know we had Jaws.
I have always, ever since home video started, I've always had a copy of Jaws.
Yes.
I've never had any of the sequels.
We had Jaws 3, but that was...
I feel sorry for you.
Yeah. That's because we recorded it off of HBO, because HBO played it ad nauseum.
I personally believe Jaws 3 is the worst of the 4 movies.
I have not watched Jaws the Revenge in quite a long time, but from episode 2 of Is It Jaws, I would tend to agree with you. And part of that is also because I have a bias against 3D films that have to prove they are 3D films. Like
having the shark burst through the glass.
Or having the shark jaws fly out of the screen at you and smile at the end. Yeah.
I have a bias against 3D movies in general. I did, however, see Jaws 3D in the movie theater.
Okay. Well, you're one up on me because I've only ever seen it as Jaws 3. I've never seen the 3D portion of it. But
you did not miss out on anything.
I didn't think I did. So I was very familiar with that, and I remember when I was younger, I knew a lot about Jaws. I knew a lot about Jaws 3. So Sean's aversion to the water in Jaws 3 didn't make much sense until I watched Jaws 2 more, and that's like, oh, the girl that was taking care of him got eaten right in front of him. Yeah, that messed me up too.
Yeah, you'd think.
But we also have the not just the parents and the kids, because you have Brody and Michael, but you also have Larry and Larry. Larry Sr., the mayor, and Larry Jr. And the dynamic there seems a lot different in that it's almost like Larry Jr. can do whatever the hell he wants because his dad's the mayor and one of the more affluent men on the island, I would assume. I mean, he's the chief real estate broker, as we see in the first movie. So you have Mike is forced to get a job. And that's another thing that I didn't share with Mike is I wanted a job. I actually asked my parents if I could get a job when I was 16. They had to sign a paper to say, yes, he can work at this age.
16?
16.
You're a piker. I started working when I was 12.
Yeah, well.
That was back when a 12-year-old could deliver newspapers and it wasn't a 45-year-old.
Yeah, I never had a paper route because all through school I was never a morning person. I'm actually still not a morning person, although my brain tells me I am, because I can't sleep past 6 a.m. I don't care what day of the week it is. Even if the sun's not up yet, at 6 o'clock, I wake up, I look over the clock, and God, I can't.
Yeah, no, I know that feeling.
So you have Mike getting a job, and Larry is essentially making fun of him for it. I'm convinced that one day when Mike is on the beach painting the changing rooms, that Larry took the sailboat down that beach on purpose to say, hey, look at what I'm doing while you're working. And you don't see a lot of parental interaction except between the chief and Mike. And that seems, at least from my perspective, that seems like a fairly normal father-son relationship. What do you think on that, Paul?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's the, like you said, it's the only one that's fleshed out at all, and there's only really the two that you see. You see Larry and Larry Jr., and you see Mike and Chief Brody. You don't really see none of the other kids seem to have any parental influence in their lives, which, I guess that's more or less to kind of streamline the movie.
Right.
Larry Jr. almost struck me as kind of the caricature of the spoiled brat.
Yeah.
Kind of like Reggie in the Archie comics. Whereas Mike and the Chief, that does seem to be a little bit more realistic of a relationship. There's a little antagonism going on, but you also know that deep down inside there's some respect and love there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see when Mike doesn't want to get the job, but he does it anyway. And when they're at the lighthouse, when they find the killer whale, and Brody says, you're coming back with me, but my boat's here, but I'm on a date, she'll understand you're coming back with me. no matter what Mike does, the chief says, "You're coming back with me," and Mike does it.
Yeah, Mike understands that it's not up for debate.
Right. Yeah, he tries, but once Dad has said this is the way it is, okay, I'm resigned to it. Take my vote back, please.
One of the things about this movie is that it's pretty commonly thought that that the main performance was mailed in. That Roy Scheider, kind of didn't want to do this, did it because he was under contract to do it, so he had to, and that he really didn't give it his A game. I tend to disagree with the common conception there because I thought that his performance is pretty good. I think the weaknesses are more to the script than it is his performance. And I do think that's kind of shown in this relationship with his son in the movie. I think you see the underlying, attitudes they have towards each other and feelings they have towards each other, and that's acting. So, that's one of my things about this movie that I think is underrated.
Oh yeah,
with Roy Scheider's performance. I
agree, because he may not have wanted to do the movie, but it didn't mean that he didn't give it his best performance. There are several scenes in here where he doesn't say a word, but you know exactly what's going through his head. Like when the ski boat blows up and he's at the old lady's house, which I have to say, that position of that house on the beach, on the wrong side of the dunes, dumbest construction idea ever.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
But he's standing on the porch, and you can see the wheels turn in his head. Like, what would cause this? How did this happen? Why can't we find them? And the whole time, Tina's there. Chief, can we go? And he doesn't hear her. He's lost in his own world. And it's not him just standing there. He is acting in that moment, and you can tell it by the expression on his face. So if he was mailing it in, he would have just been leaning on a post there going through the motions, and he wasn't, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Roy Scheider, as a general rule, I think he's an underrated actor. I think he gets credit for Jaws, but a lot of people overlook the rest of his career, and I think he's one of these guys who pretty much routinely gave a good performance in just about everything he did. He was in some movies that probably weren't good choices to be in.
Right.
But I don't think his performance ever reflected that. I think, the script did, the directing did, sometimes just the story idea did. but I think his performance was always pretty much on the money.
I agree. Yeah, everything I've seen him in, even Sequest, which I am a fan of, I thought he did a great job. He always brought something to it. Now, I did do a little reading on this movie this afternoon just to get it in my head before I watched it. And I want your opinion on the idea that they were originally going with the first director, in that Amity was essentially a ghost town. And the new condo development was what was going to breathe life back into it. And that's why they were shoving Brody off with the shark thing, because if this does not work, everyone here is pretty much dead.
Yeah, I don't mind that. When I talked to Rob Kelly about this, we talked about how there was an underlying plot line originally with the mob, where they had lent money to the island, to the government of the island, to kind of get them afloat again. And I'm glad they did away with that.
Right.
Because I think it was just an unnecessary subplot. The problem with this movie, in general, to me, is they did take into account that generational aspect that you talk about, and I think that's a positive to it. But when you get to the shark moments, they just said, let's kind of revisit what we've already done because we know the audience liked that. And then they revisited it and didn't do it as well. They tried to up the ante a couple of times, have the shark do more spectacular things. I think if they had spent a little bit more time on developing some of these characters and things, that things would have been better, and that the movie would have been better. Jaws doesn't work because the shark special effects are so wonderful. In fact, Jaws works often because the special effects were so poor that they had to keep the shark hidden. So in Jaws 2, to just say we're going to up the shark effects, I think they missed, no pun intended, they missed the boat on what made it so successful the first time around. And I think if they had really tried to take some of these teenagers and make them real three-dimensional characters and not stereotypes, they would have had a much better film when they were done.
Yeah, if you take out, and it's kind of important to the plot, but not so much. If you take out the scene with the water skier and that whole shark bit, and you don't show what happened with the scuba diver, he suddenly comes up, he panicked, you just get the story, you don't see, like, we were watching this today, and Michelle leaned over to me and says, is this an extended cut? I said, no, and this happened to be during the scuba scene.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, I don't remember any of this from when I watched it on TV. I said, well, for TV, this is something that's really easy to cut out, because you just have them go in, and then you have the shark show up, and the guy panic and come up. Whereas this was a lot of underwater, oh, isn't this beautiful down here? Oh, look at that poor lobster who has no claws on him, so he can't bite the actor. And you don't need any of that. You could you cut that section out, you can cut the water skier out, and that means that the shark isn't really shown for the first half of the movie, and use that extra time for the character development. Or one thing you do is you put the scene back in where the mayor, Larry, voted against getting rid of Chief Brody.
Oh, that's a pivotal point with me, too. I agree 100% that scene needed to be left in.
Yeah, because you the whole time, if that scene's in there, you see that Larry is trying his best to keep Brody around, no matter what he's done. And the pained look on his face, even in the scene that's still in the movie, in that council meeting, he's mentally telling Martin to shut his mouth. He's sitting there like, don't do this now. I'm trying to save your job. Shut up. But if you have that scene where Larry is actually willing to stand up to everybody else and say, no, I want him there, it means that the character, it did not forget what happened 7 years in the past. Now, the timeline's all screwy here, because the movies are 3 years apart. Brody in the movie itself says it's been 4 years, but Michael is about 7 years older. So I'm calling it a 7-year difference.
But no matter what you go as far as the number of years, you could say it's the next season. Larry had a story arc in the first movie where he went from being stubborn, and they showed you why he was being so stubborn, and I thought that was key too. They showed you the pressure he was under from the citizens in the town, the businesses in the town, to keep the beach open, and the measures he took to follow up on that. But eventually that came back to disaster, and he realized it, which is why he ultimately signed the order to have Quint go after the shark. So now to just have him be in total denial the way this cut of the film looks, it's just as if that never happened, that character growth.
Right.
And that really disturbed me in watching the second one, because he is no longer a three-dimensional character. He's no longer a character who's had that growth. He's just a plot point now. And I don't think, I'm trying to remember the actor's name, I don't think he treated it that way. Like you said, he had those facial expressions where he was trying to show that his character had motivation to say what he was saying and everything. But I think the script let people down in this movie a lot.
It did, yeah, and it's a shame, because it could have built so much on the original. Some of it tried to, but, I mean, the original idea for this, the very first idea, was a prequel to go back to the Indianapolis, which I don't necessarily think you can connect beyond the fact that Quint was there.
You couldn't have Robert Shaw play the part. I mean, he was still alive, I believe, when this movie came out. But you couldn't do it because that was supposed to be, 25, 30 years earlier.
Right.
So you'd have to have a younger actor who looked like Robert Shaw play the part. So it wouldn't have necessarily the same connection. It's a movie I still would like to see, though.
Yeah, well, I saw... It wasn't a movie so much as a reenactment kind of thing on the History Channel about the Indianapolis. And that was really interesting. I can't remember what when it was. It had to be like 10 years ago now, but it was a 2-hour documentary that they had recreations of the men in the water and how they had to cover themselves with the oil to act as a sunscreen and things like that. But a movie based on that, especially if you got someone like Spielberg or Ron Howard to direct it, would actually be really, really good.
The closest thing I can think of was that movie, it's got to be maybe 7-8 years ago, Open Water. Not that it's anything to do with the Indianapolis, but that had the people out on a boat, and then they were stranded, and their legs were in the water, and eventually the sharks came.
Right.
And they were trying to come out with ways to get by it. And if I understand correctly, that was based on a true story, but they really had to just kind of guess at what happened once they were out there because the people were killed.
Well, it's
spoiler alert, by the way, anybody who wants to see Open Water.
It's like the perfect storm, I mean,
yeah,
really, once you lose communication with the Andrea Gale, it's all just made up.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Which is, the reality of most of these based on a true story movies. Nobody, unless you have an autobiography or somebody who's in the room who took down the dialogue or whatever, it's always made up.
Oh, yeah. Well, this person's, he's actually the amalgam of these 3 real people. Just because that one had a line, that one had a line, and that one had a line, so we give this one guy 3 lines.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. And, but back to the topic at hand.
Sorry to just take you on all these tangents.
Yeah, because that never happens on this show.
Well, it's the story of my life. Yeah. Tangenting is my business.
The one thing that I really liked about the way Chief Brody, or the way Roy Scheider handled it, but the way it was written too, is when he's on the launch and he comes across Mike and the 2 guys coming back after Mike was knocked out, but he's woken up since then. Michael is distraught that Sean came with them and is now out there. But he's still seeking his father's blessing for it. He wanted to come. That's all right, isn't it? And then Brody just looks at him and says, forget it. Where are they? It's because he's not going to get into this now. He's probably not ever going to get into it with Mike about bringing Sean out because the kid's been punished enough by himself. But whereas some of the other screen parent-son relationships like this, he would have, just tore into him right there. What are you thinking? No, this is a guy who's concerned about both his children, one of which he didn't know was out there till right now, and he's focused completely on saving his son. Michael's fine, he's safe, fine. You go to the lighthouse and wait. I'm gonna go get my other boy.
Right, which is really exactly the way it should be.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things also that I think is misunderstood a little bit in Jaws. Because I think, Quint is shown as such a stereotypical tough guy, and Hooper is able to kind of handle himself in whatever situation, even though he's not especially tough to, in his demeanor. And I think people think of Brody as somewhat like wimpy, and he's not at all.
No. In fact, he's a hell of a lot braver than the other 2, in my opinion, because the entire time he's on the Orca, he's scared stiff. He has a fear of the water. And he's volunteered to go out on this boat with this nut job and Hooper, who ain't wrapped too tight, possibly not to come back. So the entire time he's sitting there, even when he looks relaxed, inside he's scared stiff. So to do what he does while feeling that, he is the bravest one out there.
Yeah, bravery isn't not being afraid. Bravery is how you deal with your fear.
Right.
And Roy Scheider, Martin Brody, clearly is willing to be up to the challenge no matter what comes his way, because that's what he does in both of these movies. Now, sometimes the scenes aren't exactly realistic.
Oh, yeah.
Just the concept that this shark is coming straight for you, And you're going to hold the electric line
until the last second.
Until the last second and direct it right into the shark's mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just, there's all sorts of levels of reason to disbelieve that.
Well, yeah, but...
And it's one of the things about, the first Jaws movie, apparently Peter Benchley thought the ending as they wrote it was unrealistic, with him shooting the gas tank and having the shark explode. And Spielberg's response to that was, if I've got them for the first, whatever it is, hour and 50 minutes of this movie, they're going to accept whatever I do at the end now.
Yeah.
I can stretch reality a little bit here.
And to be quite honest about it, I've read Jaws, I've read the novel, and the movie is 1,000 times better, in my opinion, because in the novel, I was rooting for the shark. There is no character that is redeemable in that novel. I wanted the shark to eat all of them. And the fact that it dies because it gets twisted in the lines and essentially drowns is, you just read as like, oh, okay. You do that in the movie and people are going to riot.
Yeah, it certainly we wouldn't be talking about it now.
No, definitely not.
Well, Jaws is one of several movies that I would say transcend the source material and is better than the source material.
I agree, yes.
There aren't many. More often than not, if you read a book and then you go see the movie version of it, more often than not, you're going to walk away and say the book was better.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while you get one that's the reverse of that, and this is one of them.
I agree. Yeah, this is one of the very, very few. Another one which pisses off a friend of mine, hi Sean, is I believe that the movie League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is infinitely better than the Alan Moore comic.
You cut out for a second. Which is the movie?
The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and Skype looks like it's about to die again.
Well, hopefully it does not. I am not much of a fan of either the comic or the movie on that one, to be honest with you. And I've read the comic and I've seen the movie.
Yeah, the movie I think is better. I enjoy it more just as a action romp. I don't like some of the characterizations. I don't like the way they portray the different characters. But again, you read the comic and I can't really root for any of these people. And then some of the ancillary stuff that goes with it, you just read it and it's like, what is going on here? So yeah, but yeah, Jaws is one of the very, very few, and Jaws 2.
We have to get back to that one, don't we?
Yes, we do. Jaws 2 it's a decent enough movie, but you can't really live up to Jaws. There's no way a sequel was ever going to be better than that original. It earned a mess of money. It was a very brief time the highest grossing sequel ever made until 1980.
But I think they had the grain of a good idea.
Yes.
I think when they said, let's go with the next generation and let's see how it hits them and how they deal with it, I think that was a good concept to run with. The whole idea of these teenagers. Now you needed to come up with some believable way that one or more than one of these teenagers was going to walk away from it alive without Chief Brody saving their butts. Because ultimately by having that happen, this movie becomes a subpar rehash of the first movie.
Right.
So I think you needed to tread some new ground there. And it's difficult to do because the bean counters are saying this is what people want, give them more of it. And no, there's no question about it. The bean counters and the creative people are very rarely on the same page. So in this instance, you needed somebody with what you needed somebody like Steven Spielberg to say, I want to come back and do Jaws 2, but here's how I want to do it. And even at that point in his career, I think he might have had the clout to get away with that, coming off the first one and how successful he was.
Yeah, but he didn't want to do it because he went through such a huge hell filming the first one, and he didn't want to repeat it. And you can't really blame the guy.
No, not at all. And honestly, while that is my opinion of this movie, I think he did not live up to my what I'm saying here when he did the sequel to Jurassic Park.
Well, then again, you had the sequel to Jurassic Park, the sequel novel to Jurassic Park, actually undid part of the end of Jurassic Park. Because in the movie, Jeff Goldblum's character lives. In the novel, he dies.
Mm-hmm.
But in the sequel novel, he's the main character.
Yeah.
So Michael Crichton went back and rewrote his own history because he got letters saying, I want more dinosaurs. Not exactly the best reason to write a novel.
Yeah, well, I thought Jurassic Park, when I read it, which was before the movie came out, I thought it was awesome. I thought it was great.
I agree. I enjoy that movie.
When The Lost World came out, I enjoyed the book, and then I enjoyed the movie. And although I do feel the book is slightly superior to the movie. When The Lost World, the book came out, I read that, and I saw it as kind of a ho-hum sequel to the book Jurassic Park. And then the movie came out, and I thought the same exact thing. So it almost felt like The Lost World on both levels was more of a money grab than a creative effort.
Yeah.
And now here I am giving Spielberg credit, saying no, he wouldn't do that. He would go for the, the more clever, more creative choice.
Well, back in the 70s, he might have. Because you're talking a 20-year time span where he ceased. He's still a great director, but he ceased being the young, I want to do it my way director to being the my name goes above the title. It is Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. It is Steven Spielberg's whatever. Steven Spielberg presents Tiny Toon Adventures. Which I'm not making up either.
No, I know you're not.
So he became more of a businessman than young, I want to go out and do this my way, filming in the rough kind of director. So in 78, he might have done his own thing, and it might have been a better sequel. We'll never know, really. So, but what we got is not bad. I defy anyone to watch that and say that is a bad movie, because it is not. It is not on the same level as the first one, but it is not Jaws 3.
Well, and I think that's where it falls.
Mm-hmm.
It falls in comparison to the first. If there had never been a Jaws, or if you had never seen Jaws, if you, in watching these movies, if you had not let your daughter see Jaws and you just sat her down to watch Jaws 2, she might have been exhilarated by it.
Yeah.
But having seen Jaws, eventually she got bored and walked away.
Or it could just been that's the mood she was in.
It could be. But I think there is at least some validity to that argument that if you had not seen Jaws, if you watch Jaws 2 having never seen Jaws, you are more likely to like it more than you would as the sequel.
I agree. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, it's because it's a good enough movie. It is probably more along the lines of that era's horror trope, in you see the monster often, and sometimes when you're not expecting it, but sometimes you're seeing it well before the characters do. So yeah, I would compare it to like a Halloween, where you see Michael Myers, you see him show up at these various places. No one but the audience knows who he is, but you're seeing him a lot, and it builds until you get the last half hour of the movie is, who's going to die next, and in what manner? Which is exactly what Jaws 2 is. Once they're out there alone on the sailboats, it's who's getting eaten next. I mean, he even ate a damn helicopter,
Well, I would disagree with you to the extent that I think Halloween is a superior horror film to Jaws 2. I think it builds suspense better, and I think it is more frightening.
I agree. I'm just saying that they're in the same class as far as tropes of that era's horror movies.
I think where you really see the better side of Jaws 2 is in comparing it to the other movies that tried to exploit what Jaws had done. Look at a movie like Grizzly that came out in that era, and how badly that was put together.
Never saw it.
Saw it in the movie theater. But, that is the difference between success and jump scares.
Right.
Is really what it comes down to. And this movie, this movie has some suspense to it, and it has some genuinely frightening scenes. And I don't think it's a bad movie. I just look at it and think, I see where it could have been better.
Yeah, and also part of that is looking at it from a more mature movie-going perspective, at least for me, because I've done enough viewing of movies. I've also made some videos on my own, so I can pick out. It was funny. We went this past Sunday, and it was the 30th anniversary of the movie Labyrinth with David Bowie. And we all went to the theater because they were showing it, and we watched it, and then we came home, and we have it on DVD because it's one of my wife's favorite all-time movies, and I put in the behind-the-scenes featurette. And they're going through how they did the Fire Gang, and everyone's in black velvet, and Kira turned to me and said, I thought something looked off, because normally if you just see an actor in front of a background, they don't have an outline. So I'm able to pick that out now because I've done blue screen work, so I know what to look for. She's just picking it out just by looking at it and saying, hey, that doesn't look right. So from my perspective, I know how movies are made because I am a behind-the-scenes junkie. I will watch every behind-the-scenes feature you put on DVD. I will listen to every commentary track that comes out, which annoys Michelle no end. So I know how the sausage is made. So I look at this movie and I say, oh, well, you could have cut this. You could have added this back in. You could have changed the story this way. So I see now where it would have been a better film, whereas when I first saw it when I was a kid, it was, more shark. And that's all I want out of it.
But I think that's what they went for, and that's maybe the whole idea was we're going to focus on a teenage cast to entice teenagers who aren't going to look at it this closely. And our target audience is people from age 10 to 18. Maybe that was their idea.
Maybe. I mean, it financially it worked for them.
Especially with a summer movie, you're more likely to get your repeat viewings out of teenagers.
Right.
But I also think where you really succeed, generally, obviously this one's an exception to that, but I think where you really succeed is when you get the movie that it's just an event. Everybody needs to see it.
Yes.
James Cameron did it with Titanic, and then he did it again with Avatar. He even did it with Terminator 2 to some extent.
Yeah, or like Tim Burton with Batman in '89.
Yes. Now that succeeded on both levels because I think that was one where everybody wanted to see it, but you also got the repeat viewings out of the teenagers.
Yes. Yeah. I know for me, because when that came out, I was one of the people waiting in line outside the movie theater to get in on opening night. It was me, two of my friends, and one friend's father, because he wanted to see it too. He was a big comic book guy as well. So we were all standing, which I never do anymore. I don't stand in lines to get movie tickets anymore because there's always so many theaters, and each theater has a umpteen screen showing it. This was a 2-screen theater when that came out. So,
that may be the finest pre-opening public relations campaign I have ever seen on a movie.
Oh, yes, I agree. Yeah, just some of those simple TV spots. Michael Keaton dressed as Batman just looking up into the light, and just you go up and you see the logo, and that's it.
And just the logo was omnipresent. T-shirts, billboards, movie, newspaper ads, like everywhere you looked, you saw the bat signal.
Yeah.
The bat symbol.
Either way.
It was just the closest thing I can remember to that of all things was when they came out with the movie about Malcolm X. Just so many hats with the X's, shirts with the X's, everything, everywhere you looked, there was something, but it wasn't quite to the level of the bat signal.
No. Also, but you still had people wearing the symbol that didn't exactly know what was going on behind the symbol.
Yeah, exactly. You had a buzz that people didn't even know why there was a buzz.
Yeah.
But then when the movie came out, certainly with Batman, I don't know what the final box office was on the Malcolm X movie, but on Batman, it was certainly a successful campaign.
Oh, yes. Yes, very. Well, seeing as
You
how...
were Jaws.
Yeah. Well, I would say since we've gotten to talking into our experiences with Batman and Malcolm X, maybe we should wrap this up.
Whatever you say, my friend.
Yeah, I think we ran it quite well not into the ground, into the fiberglass rocks on the barge that was Cable Junction.
But I think I just want to, say before we close it out that for as critical as I think some of our discussion was of it, that was more the aspect that we talked about where we saw how much better this could have been, but that isn't to say that this was a bad movie.
I agree. Yes,
This is a very watchable movie.
Yeah, this is the only other Jaws I have a DVD of. I have the original and I have this one, and that is it. The other two spots in my DVD case are blank.
I don't have a copy of this, and I don't anticipate getting one. And I don't think I'd want to watch it. When I first saw this in the movies, I saw it as a double feature.
Okay.
So Jaws, then Jaws 2, and it even then paled in comparison. So I don't think I would ever want to watch it that way again. But if I were flipping through the channels and I hadn't watched Jaws in a while and this was on, I think I could watch it and be perfectly entertained by it.
I agree. Yes. All right. Well, before we go, how about you tell everyone where they can find you out on the internet?
Well, if you're looking for me, you look no further than twotruefreaks.com, where I am the co-host on Back to the Bins. I am a co-host on Listen to the Prophets. I am a co-host on Keep 'em Flying. And I am the host with guest stars on Is It Yours? We review comics, we review Deep Space Nine, we review Firefly, and we review movies. Come on along and listen to us.
And all of them are excellent shows, I can tell you, because I listen to every single episode on the day it comes out, if not the day after.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
But that's all part of my OCD.
I like to think that you just like them.
Well, I must like some of them. Well, I don't write into the Firefly show because the way Andy had explained it to me initially is we're going to record all of them and then release them. So I just never even bothered. And by now you're so far into it, by the time I write you about this episode, you're going to be watching Serenity. So, again, why bother?
Well, we as it stands right now, as you and I record today, we have completed every regular season episode of Firefly, and all we have left to do is we're going to do the movie Serenity, and then we're going to probably do a wrap-up show.
Okay. So as of this point right now, you have not seen Serenity.
I have not.
Okay.
My son binge-watched Firefly when he saw that I was watching it, so he's seen all 14 episodes. We're trying to convince my daughter to binge-watch it, and then we're going to watch Serenity together.
Oh, okay. I enjoyed Serenity. But then again, I never watched Firefly until right before Serenity came out.
Well, so Scott McGregor saw Serenity and then went back and watched Firefly.
That's interesting. That is actually a very interesting way to do it, because then you have some knowledge about certain characters that...
I appreciate your couching that in terms that will not spoil it.
Yes. That would actually affect your viewing of the series, and you will see what I mean pretty much when you get into the very beginning of Serenity, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
Yes, I'm looking forward to watching it, but I just, like I said, I'm biding my time because we want to make it into a family movie night.
Yes, yeah, and actually I should actually start watching Firefly again, but right now, and as we record this, dear listener, it is the middle of September, but last week, on September 8th, we watched The Man Trap.
Mm-hmm.
This week, I believe we'll be watching Charlie X on the 15th, and I'm going to try, on the 50th anniversary of each episode, to watch that episode.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
So, it's going to be interesting trying to figure out how to work anything else in. Because Supergirl is coming back. The Flash is coming back.
Yeah, that's going to keep me active.
You know, I mean, we're already going to be watching these other things. Kira's going to have 2.5 hours of dance class on Friday nights. So, yeah, it's going to be one of these things that you got to work it all in. Firefly may just have to get pushed to the side.
Well, I know I finally have got myself back into, I'm about a month into it now of doing the treadmill every day.
Aha!
And I'm using that as my time to do a Breaking Bad rewatch.
Oh, that's good. That's a very good idea.
So, that's the nice thing is if you get embroiled enough in the show, then you don't even realize the time is going by that you're on the treadmill.
Yeah, that helps. Yeah, whereas I'm the idiot that runs around my neighborhood, so I just have to... I listen to music when I go because it gives me a pace to run at.
I used to do that many years ago, with a Walkman with a cassette in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did find that was very... it would just clear my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, because...
So I would kind of lose track of the time and the distance because I would just have this, just this feeling of, for lack of a better word, serenity. Just where I was, I wouldn't really be thinking about anything. Just keep going.
Yeah. Well, I have an exercise tracker on my phone, which will give me updates. I have it set every quarter mile to give me an update. Total distance, total time, average pace, and split pace is what it tells me every quarter mile I get that update, so I know whether I'm running too fast, not fast enough, and believe it or not, it's usually too fast, which is interesting because I'm not when I'm running for distance, I'm trying to run more rather than run then walk then run then walk. I'm trying to get to the point where I can run the whole way, but that means I have to keep some gas in the tank, so I can't run as fast.
Right.
If that makes any sense whatsoever.
Absolutely, it does.
Okay. So now that we've, gotten into the Matt Goes Running show on Neozaz, I'll just thank you very much for coming on. This it's always fun talking to you, but this is one of the few times I've actually gotten to talk to you one-on-one, and that makes it even more special.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me, and I enjoyed it. It's hopefully we'll come up with other topics, and we'll do some more of this. Plus, we'll be doing some Is It Yours episodes. That'll give us some more one-on-one time as well.
Yes. Yeah, as long as Dr. Bill doesn't horn his way in.
Well, the first one we have planned is going to be you and Dr. Bill, but there'll be others.
Well, that's because when you said, what do you want to cover, Bill and I almost immediately said the same movie. So we kind of have to do it together.
Yeah, I almost feel like I should bow out of it.
No, because if you bow out of it, it's just going to be the two of us gushing like fanboys. We need some perspective here.
The nice thing about that one, and I'm not going to even say what the movie is because we'll just leave it up in the air, but the nice thing is it is a very popular geek movie that, much like Firefly and much like Serenity, I've never seen.
Mm.
So you guys are going to gush over it, and I'll be the newbie who has to comment on, what my first thoughts were.
And I'm looking forward to that. I want to hear your perspective because there are some movies like this one in particular where I will put it on. A great example was the Sam Jones Flash Gordon from 1980 with the Queen soundtrack. I got that for Christmas one year on Blu-ray. So I will put it in one day, and Michelle walked in. What are you watching? Flash Gordon. Was what I got. And she sat down. She started watching it with me. At the very end, she looked at me and said, that was actually pretty good. So this is what the movie we're going to be talking about. It's another one of those where she'll give me that look, and sometimes she'll be into it, sometimes she won't. It depends on her mood, what's going on in our lives, etc. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. It should be a fun one, and hell, I'm going to have fun just rewatching the movie. And if that's not enough of a tease, people, to go listen to Is It Jaws, then just go listen to Is It Jaws, because it's a wonderful podcast.
Oh, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. It's become, they're all a labor of love, but this is the first one where I'm kind of flying solo, even though I have a guest star in every episode, but it's still my baby.
And it's actually the first one where it's your concept, too, isn't it?
Yeah, Sean, Andy, and I kind of all combined on the concepts for Keep 'em Flying and Listen to the Prophets. So, I had input into them.
Right. But
Back to the Bins existed well before I was on it.
But this one is all you.
This is all me. And, all me and whoever my guest happens to be that given week.
Right. And they're all fun so far. I've enjoyed every one of them. Even if I haven't seen the movie recently, I still enjoy listening to it.
Well, there's a lot more to come.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. So, Remember, twotruefreaks.com, and make sure you click on that Amazon link if you're going to buy anything. And I would suggest buying some of these movies that Paul's going to be talking about, because you want to watch them before you listen to them.
And iTunes reviews.
Oh, yes.
For Gene and for me.
Yeah, and I'm always very happy to get iTunes reviews. I don't care if you're another podcaster. Just leave me an iTunes review, even if it's a 1-star, as long as you explain it. That's all I care about. I want the interaction, whereas Paul's all about the 5 stars.
I want the 5 stars.
All right, well, thank you again, Paul, and we will see you next time, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Hammer Podcasts. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send an email to gene@thehammerstrikes.com. If you like what you've heard, please visit the Patreon page, which is located at patreon.com/thehammerstrikes, and consider becoming a sponsor of the show. Please be sure to check out the Hammer Strikes on Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and YouTube. The Hammer Podcast is a proud part of the Two True Freaks Internet Radio Network.